Welcome back to BDP Garage. I thought it's such a beautiful day out. Instead of being in the garage, we'd be outside the garage, and I can kind of show you the whole thing of what I've been working on instead of just staring at a little portion of the fender the entire time. So more like not like a garden tour or a garage tour. It's a Blazer tour. So that's the fender I've been working on. It's actually gotten really good. It's got a little bit of surface rust starting to form in a couple places, so I'm going to have to address that with some paint pretty soon. The truck is a 1971 Chevy Blazer. It has 37-inch tires right now. It originally came with, I think, 31-inch tires. And so that's the whole reason of why this wheel well had to get opened up. If we go around, I can show you the interior. It's got I've got some custom seats in there. These are the low back bucket seats. The convertible Blazers originally came with just low back bucket seats, and so I didn't want to get big fancy headrest seats in here because it would kind of spoil the look and the feel of the old Chevy Blazer, and so that's why those are there. They're pretty comfy. I've got some custom seat brackets that I made so people can get in the back. This is a 4-seater truck, so it's got a back seat that normally bolts in here, but I've got some bikes back here because my son and I were doing some mountain biking today, and so that seat is out. So that's people get in and out of the truck through that way. I can show you what kind of a cool thing is this dash. It has more modern odometer gauges in it instead of the old style 40, 50-year-old gauges. They still look authentic, so you wouldn't really notice if you didn't already know that. So that's kind of cool. I did a bunch of painting a number of years ago. Painted the color as a Chevy Hugger Orange from 1971, and so that's the ultimate plan, is to get a bed liner color that matches, and the outside of the truck also matches the same orange. And so that's the interior of the truck. There's not a whole lot to it other than the roll cage. Roll cage I designed by myself, but I hired someone else to fabricate most of it for me. It was a little different. This back half they originally did, and it came down into the front of the dash, and I ended up cutting it off and reconfiguring it so that this roll cage tubing goes down into the engine bay. Actually, I can show you, it goes into some bracketry under here, and that bracket goes down and ties into a rocker box replacement. That's that 4x4 rectangle tube that I was welding this back fender on to earlier. And so these down tubes for the cage tie into that rocker box, and so it really stiffens up the body. So when you're even not just off-road, but even on the road, it really stiffens it up. But there's no more squeaks and rattles, and well, there still is some squeaks and rattles, but not related to the body. So let's take a look at the engine. The engine is a big block Chevy 7.4 liter. It is a stock motor from 1985. I think I bought it from a guy on Craigslist, for $400 or something, and then rebuilt it all from scratch myself. Didn't do any machining or boring, just replaced all the bearings and seals and that kind of stuff. It's got some neat exhaust manifolds. Those are stainless steel, bigger bore manifolds. I think from Speedway Motors. They're made for race cars, and I don't think this is the farthest thing from a race car it ever could be. But those were kind of neat. They still look the part of an exhaust manifold, but they're supposed to act more like a shorty header, so that the engine can breathe a little bit better. Although this engine has peanut port heads on it, so it doesn't breathe that well anyway. So another thing, I've got the idea behind the engine is that it looks like an engine from 1971 with a carburetor and the stock air cleaner and all that kind of stuff. But it has a fuel injection, so it's a GM throttle body injection from 1989-ish, I think. That's where most of the parts were sourced from. So it's got a little adapter plate on the intake manifold for that. So I have a computer that I've tuned the chip. I have the equipment to tune the chip to tune the computer to better fit with this motor. So it's a little bit it's not a stock program or a stock GM motor program for this. So I don't think that's anything amazing. It's just it's throttle body injection, nothing fancy, but it works good when the truck is going uphill at really steep angles and bumping around and doing all that stuff. When I first got this truck, it was fun to go to Moab, Utah and drive around and do all those kind of fun trails, but the very first year I took it out, anytime you'd hit some kind of big bump or lurch the truck in some way, the carburetor would just cut out and die. So I knew eventually fuel injection was the way to go for that. So that is that. Oh, one thing that's kind of neat is the tires that I have on this truck and the bigger axles. I can show you, they are way too much for the stock power steering pump, and so the old V-belt system from 1971 was not cutting it, and so it would just slip anytime any kind of extra force was on the tires. And so I designed a serpentine setup and the brackets to go with it. So all these brackets were designed and made by me. You can kind of see they're not all that fancy, but it works really, really well. And so that's kind of fun, and it also gets me a little bit of clearance here without that big fan shroud, so I can get the electric fans on this radiator. So that's kind of a front axle is a Dana 60 1-ton axle. It has got an electric e-locker inside it that locks it. It locks the tires, so the differential. So there's no differential when you turn it on, so it gets better traction. It has stock. I think they're not stock, but they're just 4-inch lift springs. They're not anything fancy. I think they're Tough Country Easy Ride springs. So that's what those are. I do have a crossover steering setup. That allows these Chevy trucks, the old push-pull type steering was really weird. When you get it off camber in a situation where the wheels were really off, the steering would just get wonky. And so the crossover steering really helps make the steering really steady, even at really high speeds on the freeway and really slow as well. And so let's go to the side here and show you the transmission is. Crawl under here. The transmission here is a NV 4500 5-speed manual. So it's from a 1-ton Chevy truck, big heavy duty manual transmission. It puts power to a off-road design Magnum gear reduction box, which it goes in between the transmission and the range, or the why can't I think the transfer case. So it's a gear reduction before it goes into the transfer case, so I can get really, really low gearing to go up some pretty steep hills and go really slow and have the wheel speed that's slowed down enough that it's easier to keep traction and that kind of stuff. And so I've got this custom cross member that I built to hold that up, and it gives me a little bit better ground clearance for going over big rocks and boulders and that kind of stuff. The exhaust system up front was I designed that to fit those manifolds that were up from Speedway. There's no stock exhaust kits that you can get for those manifolds in an old Chevy Blazer. So that tubing was cut and welded together out of mandrel bends. I think I got from Summit Racing. Nothing fancy, but it works really well. And it's just a single 3-inch exhaust out the back to the opposite side of the driver's corner, so passenger rear. And the idea is these convertible trucks, you can get really serious gas fumes if you go straight out the back. And so I experienced that when I first got this truck, and so I knew I wanted to get the exhaust exiting as far away from the driver as I could, so I didn't have to smell like exhaust fumes all day. And so around the back axle is just a GM corporate 14-bolt axle. That's a 1-ton full float axle. It's got 456 gears as well. It has an ARB locker instead of the E-locker back here, so it's either open, or when you turn the locker on, it's fully locked. I got disc brakes on the rear as well. I think the brakes, the disc brake brake calipers themselves were a TSM engineering brake caliper, but I think they're just copied from the GM Eldorado rear brakes from 1976 to 1978, so they have an emergency brake included in them. And I think the brackets holding those on were, I think there's a DIY 4x. Kurt makes really cool stuff, so if you need stuff like that, go check out his website, DIY4by.com, I think. The other thing, I think I've got this rear bumper. The shell is just held on there. It's just totally cosmetic. But under here, there's a 4x4 rectangle tube, and it's tied into some other bracing that goes down into the frame. When I first took this to Moab, going over, I think it was they call it the Golden Crack. It was a giant crevice in the ground that you have to go over and navigate over. The bumper hit into a rock, and it crunched this portion of the fender here. And so I've been hammering that out and trying to get it out. It's a really tough spot to get anything in there. So that bumper was, I don't think I ever have to replace it. I think the brackets just bent up and crashed into it. So the bumper was fine. It just crashed my fender. The tailgate is missing because before I started filming any of this stuff for YouTube, I just decided I wanted to get some of the dents, and the tailgate was kind of rough, to say the least. And so I had taken that off, and I was in the middle of sandblasting it and removing some dents and fixing some holes and stuff. And so that's in the garage, setting. Someday maybe I will get that out and video that and kind of show some. I had to deconstruct it a lot to get some of the dents out instead of filling it up with Bondo. So got the bikes in here when my son and I went mountain biking today, so that's kind of why the back seat is out. And I don't know that anything else is yeah. Well, you can start it up and show you how it sounds. Another thing, a nice about fuel injection is you just put the key in and turn it on. It doesn't have to crank and pump the gas pedal 20 times to get it to start. Now watch, I said that and it'll probably have a problem. It does not have a parking brake, so make sure you take it out of gear.